So, first of all, thank you so much for coming in, sharing your story with us. Looking forward to getting stuck into it. I always like to ask on these why the reason that someone decided to make the move, because it can be quite stressful.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, especially when you're selling one and buying one. So what was the kind of the big driving motivation for the actual move?
It's a good question. Glutton for punishment, I think. We're quite ambitious. So we first got on the property ladder about, 10 years ago, and we bought a little semi in Camberley, and it was a project which we did up. We did really well on, made some good money on it, and we went again 2 years later, moved to Little Sandhurst, and we did up a place, a 4-bed detached place, and I think we did quite a good job on it, added quite a lot of value to it, and we just kind of outgrown it. We like to keep putting our mark on things and improving things, and kind of when we got to the potential of it, if you like, we were a bit bored.
Yeah. So you'd done a refurb or a version of a refurb on each one.
Yeah.
And then you kind of got the itch to kind of go again, effectively, which is really, really common. It's easy to outgrow a house as well, I think, after a couple of years.
Yeah, I think so. And there were some things about the layout and the garden and things like that just weren't for us. And I think we'd maximised everything in that house, and we just run out of things we could do with it. The garden particularly, it was split onto 2 levels, and we got 3 young children. And again, it was fine. I think we'd done a good job with it, but we just couldn't take it any further. We couldn't grow the garden or anything like that. So it was time to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely maxed out, I think, wasn't it, as far as what you could do with it?
And done every inch.
You literally had, I think pretty much every single person we had round was like, everything's been done here. It's very much a come in and put your bags down house, not whether it's potential or the whole sales spiel that obviously a lot of agents like to give you, well, you could do this, you could do that. It was like, what you see is what you get. And it's ready to go. Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
Well, it was a very good house, as we know. Obviously, we had quite a bit of interest. What were your concerns before meeting me and all the agents? What were your concerns and apprehensions about moving, if you can try and cast your mind back?
Going back a little while. I think the challenge we had at that point in time was the market was changing. That was the biggest concern, and we were coming at it, I think, from quite a high price point in terms of the market, and it felt like it was cascading down almost weekly, and so it was such a moving target. You didn't really know what a good price for the property was actually going to be, because it was just constantly changing. Mortgage rates were going up and up and up, and there was so much going on politically. It was just really hard to know.
It was a challenge.
What was a good end result?
The media were like sort of almost confusing for everyone as well, because 1 minute they're painting a stat that was 6 months old, 1 minute they're predicting the future from a week's worth of data. It's kind of really difficult for us as like agents, doing it full time, let alone people that are out there kind of scrolling through Rightmove or wondering what's going on. It went from like A to B very, very quickly.
I mean, I remember having conversations with you, and we would look at houses on Rightmove, and I'll go, why is that much?
Yeah.
And you go, I don't know.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not sure where they're...
There was no trend, whereas typically you look on Rightmove and you go, that's too much, that's a good deal, that's about right. And I like to think I'm reasonably good at that.
You were pretty tuned in.
I look at property quite a lot, and I've got a good eye for it, I think. I was totally thrown. One property didn't seem to sit next to another in terms of price. And that was the really difficult thing. And it seemed that you had to be really motivated at that time if you wanted to move. It wasn't your kind of casual window shoppers back then. I don't know what it's like now. But I remember back then it was very difficult to get people to come through the door. And even when we were looking, there wasn't an awful lot on the market because people just seemed really nervous.
People were shocked on the interest rates, weren't they? People went from, within the space of 4.5, even 5 months, from under 2% to 4.5, pushing 5, and then obviously they climbed up to mid 6s and 7s, and horror stories of X, Y, and Z. And I think people were shocked. So we saw buyers just drop off the cliff off the back of that, which naturally that means that obviously the prices have to come down as a result because it's simple supply and demand.
Yeah.
Agency isn't really rocket science. There's either someone for it or there isn't. The job for us is to do the marketing the best we can, and to make sure that pricing is honest, because it doesn't mean you necessarily get it right first time, but you can quickly see within 2 or 3 weeks whether it is right because of the interest. And sometimes it's a case of then reviewing the marketing. Does that need to be tweaked? But if you've got a nice recently done out house, it makes the job a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting you say that about, kind of getting the price right, because it wasn't the first conversation we had from the next conversations we were having, obviously, in terms of the timeline and what went on. It was chalk and cheese, wasn't it? Because I know I wasn't the first agent to have it on the market.
Yeah, no,
I knew I had to throw it in there, Tom, unfortunately.
I know you wouldn't let me get away with that. Yeah, we had 3 or 4 agents round to have a look, and I think part of the challenge was, do you believe what's happening with the pricing? It's really difficult to get your head round, and I won't mention their name, but we got sucked in by an agent who was very confident they would get, and it wasn't the highest valuation that we had. It was one of the higher ones, and it wasn't so much the price. They were absolutely convinced that they had a list of people that wanted a property like this. They had them on their books. They were going to get them through the door, and that they would get this sold no problem. And it just didn't materialise. And one of the biggest problems was, we had, I guess he was the branch manager, I'm not sure, come round, do the valuation, tell us how great everything's going to be, but then it was kind of teenagers doing the viewings, and it just felt, after they got the instruction, that the quality of service just nosedived, and we just didn't get what we were expecting at all, and couldn't get this guy on the phone. He just didn't really want to know, and it sort of felt like they just wanted to get boards up to advertise the fact that they're around, rather than actually really wanting to sell the house. Just didn't seem that serious, and it was really frustrating. And obviously you and I have been chatting for a while, and I was frustrated with myself that we hadn't gone that direction, and fortunately we saw out our contract and we were able to put that right.
We did, yeah. We got there, didn't we?
We did.
But, you only learn sometimes by mistakes, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. And you think, what if this had happened? But actually, you kind of take away from it that you're a bit more wise to it now.
And I'm disappointed in myself, because I run my own business, and I like to think I'm not too naive when it comes to these things. But I was definitely sucked in, for sure.
It happens though. It's so common. I mean, it's one of the most common frustrations in a estate agency, is that you've got someone's job to quite literally go out and win the business at all costs. And even I'll mention them, but even Purple Bricks, for example, when they initially launched on the scene, the whole goal there was to just list a property. They took money up front, and that was it. That was the whole goal. And for estate agents, the goal is not to list a home. The goal is try and help you with your ultimate goal, which in this case is to find another property. It's not actually even to sell yours. It's your goal is to find the next property, and to do that you need to sell one. So it's just a section within the whole moving process. So it is a shame that going out there, and we call it overvaluing in the industry, it's a sales pitch. It is something to do, and hopefully the industry cottons onto it. I think it's getting better, but it's still rife. Well, it's still out there.
I think the thing is that I was quite wise to that. I think the fact was, it was such a strange market. Yeah. That my head was at old pricing, and so I wasn't, I guess, psychologically ready to accept that things had gone down.
Do you think the agent might have been at old pricing as well? Do you think they might have been a bit just kind of as a mistake almost?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll be charitable.
Fair enough.
I get the feeling probably wanted the instruction, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think if you own it afterwards and pick up the phone and say, look, we've made a mistake here, quite clear. We've all done it. I've done it. You've done it. You've gone, okay, I messed up on this one. I got the pricing wrong. Yeah. But you've got to own it. You've got to make the call or go back out and see the client and say, look, we're looking at what else is actually selling. And we're kind of, we're off here. We need to review things. But
and I think in defence, not a lot was selling. back then, and so it was difficult to know where that reference point was. I still don't believe it was all price. I believe a lot of it was because we got people through the door. It's not like people didn't come through the door. It's the fact that you had, really inexperienced people taking viewers through the house, and you just you need. When you're viewing a house, you want someone that's got a bit of experience. You can ask questions. You can kind of understand around local knowledge, or what have other people done to houses similar to this in the local area, and you're just not necessarily going to get that with someone that doesn't have that experience.
Was that a big difference that you found with Will and Mike, without making him blush? Because obviously these guys own their own business. You mentioned that you run your own business as well. Having the same person on the valuation, understand your goals, look at the property, get an idea of what you've done to the property, then be the same person that comes out and does the viewing with the clients. It just helps, doesn't it? It helps us, it makes us a better all-round agent by having that initial knowledge.
I think it's having that relationship. You build that relationship over time, and you're going to need that to take you all the way through the transaction. It's not just the selling part, it's then getting it over the line, all the legals, all that sort of stuff. And I think not having to phone a branch asking for someone, oh, he's not here, just having direct access to the people that are doing the transaction, dealing with things, and just silly things like you set up a WhatsApp group for us to have all the communication in. Just that elevated you above everyone else, because it's such a simple thing, but no one else does it.
It's just a bit of modern technology that everybody uses, but nobody's utilising. Isn't it just crazy? Isn't it?
There seems to be this
everyone's
idea
so
that,
busy.
But there seems to be this idea that an estate agent has to be a branch on a high street, and you have to ring them, and you have to wait on the phone, you have to get a call back, and it has to be all this formal
landline. And
whereas
voicemails.
You could just drop us a message in there going, the viewing seemed to go well. Let's give you some more detailed feedback, things like that. That's fine. That's all we needed. But even trying to get that out of the previous agent was just like pulling teeth.
Solicitors next. Get solicitors doing WhatsApp.
Yeah,
then
well, that really would be a triumph. Their prices
they struggle with email.
I'm sure their prices would skyrocket if they suddenly had to have WhatsApp on their
direct WhatsApp.
Everyone's life would be much easier though. And then the next section obviously happens, doesn't it? You get your property on the market, hopefully you sell, and then the next part is the next goal, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously when we first met, you'd already had that goal of this is the house I'd ideally like to buy, and we won't go into chapter and verse about why it didn't come to fruition, but obviously after we'd got the buyer, you were kind of hot on the property hunting, weren't you? And you knew very much what you wanted, albeit you did buy something very different from what you'd initially told me.
We did, yeah.
But how did you find the whole search process as far as, registering with the other agents? Were you, and obviously the agent that you bought through, but how was the whole process of finding the house?
I'll be totally honest, the agent we bought our house through was brilliant. I can't fault them. They were more of a branch on the high street, but they're a local specialist rather than a national brand, and they were absolutely brilliant because they had such good local knowledge. They had sold the house that we bought twice already.
Brilliant.
So they just knew it. They knew the area. They were really on it in terms of communication. They were great. I can't really fault them.
Yeah, they were good.
In terms of the search, it was pretty slim pickings, to be honest, then, because there was just very little stock. But we ended up finding sort of 3 or 4 houses that we liked, and we went and looked at a couple, and they just weren't quite right for us. And then we walked into one that we just fell in love with, really, and we hadn't expected to. But sometimes
bit of a wild card, fair to say, wasn't it? It's sort of what I'd say is probably chalk and cheese versus what you'd initially planned to try and go for.
So my uncle actually lived on the estate we've ended up buying in when I was a kid, and I always remember going there and liking the feel of it. And then suddenly the house came up on there, and went and looked at it, and it just seemed to click.
Yeah. Felt right.
Like my mother-in-law lives just around the corner and things like that, and there were just so many things going for it.
It's a great spot.
Yeah, so sometimes it's not what you expect, but that
happens so often. With the shortlist, how did you build the shortlist? You mentioned there was sort of 4 or 5 properties you quite liked. Was Was that a case of talking to agents and them letting you know what they've got? Was it a case of you were flicking through portals and websites, you comprised a shortlist? How did you get to the point of going, right, these are the ones we're going to view?
It's just Rightmove. I don't really like the idea of registering with agents. It just, what I find is they just ring you with any old rubbish when you tell them that you're looking. I mean, the amount of times in our first property search where we got taken out to sort of mid-terrace things when we specifically said we didn't want a mid-terrace house, things like that. I actually found very little value in registering with agents. I would just wait for properties to go on and then give them a call and find out what the situation was. And it was often, what's the individual circumstance with that property? You know, is it empty? How motivated are the sellers? Things like that. That's really what I would be looking for when I'm looking for a property. And so the ability to talk to someone who actually knows the
Who's
property.
seen it ideally or been in it in some way.
And actually there's certain estate agents that I don't even bother ringing.
Right.
It doesn't matter how much I like the house. I won't ring. I won't name any names.
Just the experience that you've had with them, really.
Yeah.
We'll wait till the camera's finished. Then we can have a chat. Well,
Yeah,
I reckon we could guess them.
You can play a game afterwards. You can see how many you get right. You probably get
trumps,
most of them. Yeah.
What advice would you give to, and you may have already done this, but you know, family, friends that are looking to move, now that you've gone through that experience most recently, what kind of advice would you give to any family and friends out there that are thinking of making the move, especially if they're selling and buying?
I think you've got to have an agent that's communicative, really important. I think, particularly with our house, it wasn't much of a looker on the outside, the one we were selling, but I think on the inside we've done a good job, and I think marketing was therefore really important to get people through the door. So I think you need an agent that's going to put together good marketing and that is going to be, as I say, communicative. And really, you just don't want one of these kind of high street giants that are just throwing anyone at any property, that are often incentivized by getting the instruction as opposed to the sale. You know, they take people round on viewings. They're viewing at like 10 houses in one go, and you're just one of them. You've had to get your house all tidy and clean, and actually there's no real prospect of a sale. So kind of avoiding those really, and I think from personal experience, don't chase the top price.
Yeah.
Do your own research, understand where you think your property is in terms of value. Otherwise, you just get suckered in.
Yeah. No, it's great advice. It's what we want everyone to feel and hear, and then when they're in the moment, do they trust the advice or do they take the advice on? Not even trust. Sometimes it's just you're in that moment. Just go with that. And with kind of Avocado, with Will and Mike, from your experience, is that something that you felt was very different to the previous kind of 3 times that you'd sold as well? Would you say?
Yeah, it was night and day. I think like some of the things we discussed here, just little things like the WhatsApp group and just having that consistent contact all the way through. From start to finish, and there was a bit of a wobble towards the end of ours. Our buyer went a bit quiet and didn't know what was going on, and just a calm hand on the tiller really. And I think just it also felt like you wouldn't take the instruction unless you felt you could action it.
Yeah,
and you could actually see it through, which was reassuring actually. And you certainly weren't the highest value. Which I think it felt to me like we were priced to sell in the market that we were in.
Yeah.
As opposed to let's either go super cheap so it flies off the shelf, and equally don't get anyone through the door. At the other end of the extreme, and I think that was borne out in the fact that we only actually ended up with one buyer, I think, in the end.
Loads of viewings, but one person that absolutely committed to it, and they fair to say they didn't commit straight away, but they had a bit of time to digest because it was a bit of a buyer's market. So it was a case of like, well, we'll just take our time basically to see what's going on. But it came good, and then actually sped through pretty quickly, didn't it?
Yeah,
really?
we were lucky with our chain. We had a cash buyer, and the house we were buying was empty. So we were quite lucky in that regard.
It's amazing how when we speak to agents, whether we were traditional agents previous or obviously running our own companies now, always comes back to communication is the thing that people really, really, and experience and education of communication as well, knowledge and that little bit of extra finesse or calmness really does seem to be the big difference between where people, like the local independent that you spoke about that was brilliant through your purchase, which is great to hear. You know, they were knowledgeable, good communication, very different, like polar opposite to Avocado. Obviously I know who they are, and great agent on the high street, very different to how we work, but both specialisms in their own way, and that worked.
But it was communication that was the common thread between. You know, I think they're uniquely positioned in the market that we bought in. They seem to be quite a dominant force, and everyone knows who they are.
Been around for a while.
Yeah, exactly. But it was the communication. It still wasn't as good. We still didn't have direct access to a single point of contact. There were still 2 or 3 that we dealt with. But, you know, customer service just doesn't really exist in this country anymore. And so when you find it, like I did with you guys, it's such an unusual event that you just remember what it's like to actually have good customer service, and it's just quite rare.
Yeah, and it's sadly, like the biggest complaint within the industry is the communication side, and it's so easy to try and nip that in the bud by just getting to someone first or leaving them a voice note or even just a message that takes all of like 10-15 seconds to type out, you know, just that, like, I've got your back, I've got my arm around you, this is what's going on, rather than you not knowing. And then
it's proactiveness, that's what's so rare. People just aren't, they're so reactive. Oh, okay, right, they're moaning at me again.
I'm being chased. I better get on it. Yeah,
exactly. And we just didn't experience that.
Yeah. Well, I'm pleased for you that you finally got the house. You said you love the house, you know, and that's great to hear. Round the corner from me, so nice area. And it's nice to know that obviously you had a great experience with the guys as well.
Oh, it's brilliant.
And in the end, it got there, even though little hiccup at the start, but that's very common in the property market. And your feedback and what you've said there is going to be really interesting for obviously us to watch back, and also for people that watch it. You know, the advice at the end there is really valuable advice that I'm sure some people will take up and benefit from. So thank you so much for coming on camera and doing the video with us.
No worries.
Appreciate it, Tom.